revolution. What were the 3 topics we talked about for the green revolution last time? Do you guys remember? So I'm gonna pull some sticks. Let's see. So we talked about 3 big ones. What was one of the 3? This question's going to Aaron. GMOs, perfect. GMOs was one of the big topics, right? So taking plants and making them so they're resistant to certain things. All right, what was another one? This one is going to Sylvie. What was another one of the 3 we talked about? Yeah. Selective cutting, right? So cutting land for the agriculture. Excellent. Okay. What's another part of the Green Revolution? This one is going to Emmeline. Were you here last time? Okay, cool. Then we're going to put you back in here for later. This one is going, Dylan, you were also not here last time. This one is going, goodness, everybody was not here last time. Gavin, were you here last time? I gave you crap about being at the orthodontist. Where you sit, friend? Okay, so what was another agricultural practice of the Green Revolution last time? Mechanization, right? So using machines to actually do the farming for us. So that was a big part of the Green Revolution. Now we have one more, and I'm going to give you a hint. This one has to do with something you put on your crops. So this question is going to go to Mac. Were you here last time, friend? Yeah. Okay, cool. What was the last one? Yeah, fertilization or fertilizer, right? So those were 3 of the things we talked about last time. There are 2 other parts of the Green Revolution. One is irrigation, and one is pesticides. So we're going to talk about irrigation today. So this is just going over things talked about before. So this really is just last time. If you would like to write it down, you're welcome to, but you actually don't have to. So slash and burn, that's how we clear the area for agriculture. Tilling affects the soil, and soil compacting when we use the machines, and then overusing of fertilizers. But the big idea is we want to conserve our soil. So soil conservation is one of the big ideas when it comes to agriculture and irrigation. So there's a couple different things we can do for soil conservation, and I feel like we've talked about this before, haven't we? Have we talked about contour plowing and windbreaks? I see blank stares. Okay, so we'll go over it really quickly. So soil is really important in agriculture because we actually grow our food in soil. If you don't have soil, you cannot have agriculture. So a couple of different things that farmers can do to make sure they save their soil. Number 1 is contour plowing. So contour plowing looks like this. So rather than plowing straight across, you're going to plow with the hills and the valleys to make sure that the soil does not get eroded away. Another one is windbreaks. Windbreaks is this. So windbreaks are where you plant trees around your farm so that when the wind comes through, it'll hit the trees and stop the wind from hitting the actual soil and your crops. Another one is perennial crops. So perennial crops are crops that are there all year long. And so perennial crops are really awesome because they will continue to hold the soil in even after the growing season is over. And that's a big problem with regular crops, is that regular crops usually die after the growing season. And so they die, they are no longer there, and they cannot hold the soil in anymore. Next we have terracing. So terracing is another way to farm on a hill. To keep the soil from washing down the hill, you cut terraces into the land. No-till agriculture, so making sure that when you are doing your agriculture, you're actually not tilling, because tilling is bad for the soil. And then strip cropping. Strip cropping is growing crops not 100% across the field. You're mixing it up with other crops along with it. So these are some soil conservation techniques. So the reason that we want to do this is we need to have nutrients and they need to be replenished in the soil, and the soil fertility needs to be restored. I'm also 99% sure we saw this before. Am I going crazy? Okay, cool. So we've already seen this slide before. You don't need to write it down. I'm just going to go over it one more time to make sure we understand it. So crop rotation. Crop rotation is also really good for soil fertility because different crops take different nutrients out of the soil. Green manure, which is basically composting and basically planting plants that take a lot of nitrogen out of the soil and then putting them back into the soil, so composting them and putting them on top. And then having limestone in your soil is going to be really good because it helps with acidification of the soil, and it also releases valuable nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur naturally into the soil. soil without using fertilizer. So again, talking about soil fertility and how important it is to agriculture. So water and pollution. So like we said before, the largest human use of fresh water is for irrigation. So fresh water, we only have like 1% of the water on earth is fresh water, which is water we can use. We cannot use salt water because it will kill us. So of all of the fresh water we have, of the 1% of the water on this earth that we actually can use, about 70%, this graphic says 89%, but this says 70%, is used for agriculture. So either for putting it on our lawns or putting it on our crops. So it's not for human usage as like for drinking at all. It's for keeping our crops alive. The problem with doing that is that a lot of places that we actually get our water from are called aquifers. So aquifers are caverns of fresh water that are found under the ground. And so when we find aquifers, we'll usually put a well down to them, and then we'll pull the water up. So by using this much fresh water for agriculture, we are actually taking our aquifers and we are depleting them, which is not great because aquifers have some of the best water, like really clean water to use. And so if we're drawing back our aquifers for agriculture, we're not using it for human use, and that's one of the best uses for aquifers is for human consumption. Along with drawing back aquifers, salinization can also happen. So we just barely talked about salinization. Is salinization good or bad for crops? Bad, right? So when we drew our graphs, which percent of salt had the least germination? 5%, thank you. I was like, I can draw a stick if we need to. So 5% salt had the least amount of germination, which meant that we had the least amount of life actually coming from that water. And so when we're using water for agriculture, sometimes salts can get into it and it ruins it for both humans and for agriculture. Also, we can have pollution that comes from agriculture, such as pesticides and fertilizers. Come back. You can do it. I have faith in you. Oh, there you go. And this can contaminate groundwater and surface water. So not only can we pollute our water that it can't be used for agriculture, we can pollute our water with agriculture, which is not ideal. Maybe I'll still use it next. So you can see between Nebraska, Colorado, goodness. I'm gonna blame the people upstairs. They were stomping their feet and it turned off. Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Texas. So you can see the decline in the amount of water that we actually have. So if it's red, it means that there is more than 150. Pink is 100 to 150, so a change in water. So red is bad, blue is good. So you can see that we are having a decline in the amount of water in our aquifers. So by doing agriculture and also for like New Mexico and Texas, maybe having lawns when it's a really desert area in Utah, we're also using aquifer water for our lawns and for aesthetic purposes rather than for food purposes. So you can see the aquifers are really being impacted over time. So irrigation, these are the 4 types of irrigation we're going to talk about since that is the #1 use of our fresh water. I know half of them are in orange, but I did that just so you could see the difference. You do need to write all of these down. But we will go and talk about each of these individually. So if you would like to, no, just kidding, we're not. We're just doing it really quickly. I lied, I apologize. So first type of irrigation. So this is probably the most, like the very first type of irrigation we ever had. So the most ancient type of irrigation is furrow irrigation. So furrow irrigation looks like this. So furrow irrigation is where you literally just have little lanes that go between your crops, and you flood your field that way. So you let water go into these furrows lead waters down different channels, and the crops use it. The benefit of it is that it's really inexpensive. Like, it does not cost very much water, very much money whatsoever. However, about 33% of the water is lost to evaporation or runoff. So we're losing about a third of the water when we are using furrow irrigation, which is not great. Next, we have flood irrigation. So I love flood irrigation, and that's only because when I was a kid, my uncle and aunt, they live in Mill Creek. They have water rights, and so they would flood their backyard about once a week in the summertime, and they invite us to come over as kids, and we would just play in the water. They had like this huge backyard, probably like a half an acre backyard, and they would just flood it and we'd play in it. So flood irrigation is another way of doing it. You usually don't use flood irrigation when it comes to regular crops as we think of as crops, because you can actually suffocate the plants by having too much water. But for like rice paddies and for soy fields and for grasses, flood irrigation is actually beneficial. So it's very inexpensive because you don't even have to make trenches. Like, you just let the water go wherever it's going to go. About 20% of the water is lost to evaporation or runoff, but we do have a problem with water logging. And so this is what I was talking about, how a lot of crops can actually die from too much water. So, this is going to be fun. What is the powerhouse of the cell? Mitochondria, right? So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria needs two things to survive. Do you guys remember what those two things are? Or what the two things to create energy, I guess I should say. So they have sugar and oxygen. Sugar and oxygen. So mitochondria do live in plants' roots. And so when we're doing flood irrigation, the soil can get so full of water that it basically suffocates the plant's roots. And so these mitochondria are no longer getting oxygen, which means they can't make energy. If the roots can't make energy, then they're gonna die. They can't do their job anymore. And so you kill the roots, and then the plant dies, which is why it is very easy to kill a plant by overwatering it. It is not that easy to kill a plant by underwatering it. So most houseplants die because they are too loved, they're too cared for, and that's water logging. So filling the soil so far up with water that there is no oxygen for the roots at all. Next, we have spray irrigation. Spray irrigation is probably what you guys are most familiar with because that's what the majority of us have here in Lehigh. Oh my good gravy. What in the heck? So, problem with spray irrigation is that it is expensive. Have you guys ever, probably not because you're not homeowners, but like seriously, sprinkling systems are the bane of my existence. Every single year we have to change something with our sprinkling system, and it's expensive because you have to like buy all the pipes and the glue and the sprinkler heads and all the conjoining things, but also you have to dig in the ground. Like, you have to dig like this far into the ground, and you're like, that doesn't sound so bad. No, if you have ever dug in grass before, it sucks. It's the worst. So it's expensive and time consuming, and it requires energy. Your sprinkling system will not work unless you have a sprinkler control panel inside your house or inside your garage somewhere. So it takes energy, and it's really expensive. And about 25% of the water is lost to evaporation or runoff. This is one of my biggest pet peeves in the whole entire world, is when it's summertime and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's very hot and people have their freaking sprinklers on. And you're like, do you not realize that the water droplets are already airborne and now they're evaporating and you're losing so much water? So a lot of water is lost to evaporation, and it's very expensive. Drip irrigation is the best type of irrigation on the face of the earth. It is so great. However, it is even more expensive than spray irrigation because it is so freaking finicky. So drip irrigation is the idea where you have your crops, and rather than doing a furrow or a flood or a spray irrigation, you have this tube that goes through, and it brings water to the base of every single crop individually. So you're not overwatering the soil. You're not going to have very many weeds because you're not putting water on areas that don't need it. You're putting area directly on each of your crops. However, drip irrigation, like I said, is very finicky, and so you have to go and repair it a lot. However, less than 5% of the water is lost to evaporation or runoff. which is amazing. I can almost guarantee that you're going to see this question either on my test or the AP test or both, because they really like the fact that drip irrigation does not lose that much water, which is awesome. Okay, any questions about the 4 types of irrigation? Okay, at your tables, there should be about 4 of you guys. Pick a type of irrigation and explain it to your table. Turn to talk.
They have a source of water and they release it, so it floods the area. So that's where it gets all the water.
Irrigation, about a third of the water is lost to evaporation.
All right, so just to recap really quickly, I'm just going to pull out random people. Tell me the irrigation method that you talked about. So this question is going to go to Rachel. What irrigation method did you talk about?
Drip irrigation, where it's like a tube that tracks the water in individual crops.
Yep, really expensive, but the best when it comes to evaporation. All right, next one is going to Gage. What type of irrigation did you talk about? Okay, cool. Then we'll come back to you later. This one is going to Lucy. What type of irrigation did you talk about?
I also talked about drip.
Oh my gosh, everybody did grip. Okay. Adele, are you here? Okay, let me make sure she's not here. Will Nicholson, please tell me that you did not do drip irrigation.
I did spray.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about spray irrigation.
It's expensive. It's 25% loss.
Perfect. So sprinklers, what we think of as, irrigation for us. All right. Not here. Not here. Goodness. Hank, what did you do?
Flood irrigation.
Perfect.
It's just like where you just let some water go wherever it wants.
Perfect. So you just let the water go. What's a big downfall of flood irrigation?
You lose a lot of water.
Perfect. You lose a lot of water and you get water logging. All right. Aria, did you happen to do furrow irrigation? Dang it. Okay. Who did furrow irrigation? Anybody? Okay, Charlie, will you take furrow irrigation for us? I'm sorry, Charlie. Charlotte, what the frick? Sorry.
It's inexpensive and it's like 33% of water is lost.
Perfect. So furrow irrigation is where you make little channels for the water to go. They go down it, but it does lose a lot of water. So any questions about irrigation in general? Okay. So this is just kind of showing you about salinization and waterlogging. So salinization is bad because if you get salts in the water, it's going to go into the soil, and eventually the water is going to evaporate, but the salt's going to be left away or left in the soil, and it's going to harm the plants and cause them to stop growing. And then waterlogging is like this. There's so much water that it just stays in the soil, and you can see that the roots are underneath it, and so it kills the roots off over time. So just some visuals for my visual learners. And this is showing you how aquifers can be used. So like I said, aquifers are pockets of water that are found underneath the ground. And because they go through soil, and soil has a really cool ability to purify water as it goes through it, it's very pure water. It's really awesome. So we will build wells to go down into it, and ideally over time, the aquifer should recharge itself because it's something that occurs naturally, and so over time it should be able to recharge itself. But if we're using the water quicker than it's recharging yourself, we can draw back the aquifers. That's what the term is, drawing back an aquifer, or using it unsustainably. Yeah?
So all aquifers are fresh water?
Mm-hmm. Yep, all aquifers are fresh water. Cool. So, what I want to do right now is we are going to start talking about, well, not start talking, we're going to start working on something for next time. If I can get this